Hello and welcome to Gen Z's America. I'm your hostess, Crazy Aunt Nay. In this basics video, we will talk on a very basic level about how the economy works and why things like the minimum wage affect it. This is a little difficult for some people to understand and difficult to explain because the economy works through inverse relationships. An inverse relationship is one in which the value of one parameter tends to decrease as the value of the other parameter increases. This is not normally how our brains think. It's easier to understand when one thing goes up, it makes the other thing go up also, which can prove a correlation. But when the correlation is inverse, it's harder to identify and harder to explain. So let's get into it. In basic terms, the economy is like a complex barter system. It's easy to understand barter, something for something. I give you a gallon of milk for a dozen eggs. As long as we both feel it's value for value or an equal exchange, all is well. Barter gets harder when I only have things of greater or lesser value than the things I need or want. How do you reconcile that? The answer is currency. Currency is money. Money has value in a society or system that is an understood and agreed upon value. This paper or coin money used to be literally made of precious metals that literally had that value, and later were at least based on the real source of value. When you hear the term the gold standard, it is literally the cost and value of gold that currency historically was always based upon. It's become more complex now, but for our purposes, let's just think of it that way. Now I can pay you money for goods and services instead of needing to find a way to barter goods and services value to value. Now we can establish a cost a good or service is worth. And that is what you can charge for it or pay for it. In order to understand the whole picture, let's now briefly discuss how business in a free market works. I'm sure you all understand the concept of balancing a checkbook. You have to have money in, which usually means your income from a job, and you subtract the money out, what you spend on rent, food, stuff. What is left over is your balance, which goes up or down based on if you are depositing more or spending more, right? A business is not that much different, but people often fail to understand this and fall for the greedy corporate business line and believe there is some profit money tree somewhere. We'll step through this slowly because I'm not saying there isn't greed and corruption or that making a fortune off the backs of workers isn't real. But it's misunderstood and leveraged for political talking points. So let's start with a small business. This is not a whole lot different from your household. Income in, expenses out scenario. You either make goods or sell a service, or in some cases, such as restaurants, it can be both. You put a value to that people are willing to pay, and your success is 100% tied to balancing that appropriately. If you value your restaurant too high for what you are giving, people will stop coming and your income goes down. You are poorer. You value it too low, you are working extremely hard and giving away value you could be charging for to pay employees, etc., etc. How is that different from big corporations? Big corporations, especially ones that are traded on the stock market, don't have one source of income. They often have multiple. It's not just goods and services. They might also have investment money, among other things. Additionally, due to their sheer size, they can absorb losses and negative financial impacts easier than small businesses. They generally are more concerned with stock prices than bottom line, as long as the bottom line is not failing, because this is how they gain a lot of their individual wealth. So let's talk about the minimum wage. This will illustrate the inverse relationship we touched on in the beginning. Sounds like a great idea to raise the minimum wage to some great big number so that the poor workers on the bottom can make better money. People think that means everyone will make more money and that this is all a great, wonderful thing. So why does it destroy an economy? First off, remember the word minimum. This is not and has never been meant to be a living wage. When people talk about a living wage, they mean a minimum income to support an individual or a family. A minimum wage is the very, very bottom of workers, non-skilled, never had a job, 16-year-olds. Think about your first job. How long did you work for the minimum wage? Did you get your first raise pretty quickly? When I was young, it was usually after the first month or so, you got a dime or a quarter raise. When my Gen Z kids started working, same thing happened. They got their first increase pretty quickly. Well, guess what? Now you are not making the minimum wage anymore. Let's say you got a job for $10 an hour and that was the minimum wage. In a month or two, you got a raise to $10.25. You work at the company for a year or two and continue to get small increases and promotions. Now you're a shift supervisor and you make $15.50 an hour. Suddenly the government or the voters decide they want the minimum wage to be $15 an hour. So that takes effect. Now the workers who made between $10 and $15 all get raised to $15. And any new worker you hire with no skills or experience who change the trash can make $15 an hour. What do you make? $15.50. The raise in minimum wage does not mean everyone gets raised by the same percentage. In fact, they never do. Let's look at the impact on the business. Why doesn't the business raise everyone by the same percentage rate so the salary margins stay the same? They usually can't afford to pay unskilled workers this rate, let alone raise everyone else on top of it. So what happens so they don't go out of business? They raise prices. The price raise is the same for everyone. So now we equally all make less, even though the minimum wage was raised. This is the inverse thing I was talking about. Additionally, they automate low-wage worker jobs where they can and lay off unskilled workers. Now they have no job instead of a job for $10 an hour. They stop having full-time workers at the minimum because that will make them lose even more money as they have to cover expensive benefits for full-time workers. If they only have part-time work available, they avoid that expense. Which is better, making $10 to $15 an hour full-time with benefits, or making $15 an hour part-time only, no benefits? Also, for that minimum wage worker, the cost of goods and services were raised everywhere so that business can stay in business and not go bankrupt. So have they gained any wealth or spending power because of this raise? In fact, they're worse off, and so is everyone in the middle who didn't get any raise. Now, when your bottom workers are making $15 and you are making $15.50, but you have the skills, experience, and knowledge the business needs to stay open, are you going to be happy working at $15.50 and struggling by having more responsibility and pressure on your position? Of course not. So then what happens? Skilled labor goes on strike, guys. The company will not exist without you, so you have leverage to demand higher pay, benefits, and other things. So the company makes a deal one way or another, or goes out of business. What suffers in the deal? Maybe more unskilled labor gets laid off, and more automation comes in, or the skilled labor says, I can do that guy's job too to get the raise. Or the company raises prices more, everyone loses again. Or the company decides to close. Everyone loses the most because now everyone is out of a job. This is why it sucks to have a high minimum wage. It's the minimum, guys. You should make the minimum wage at 16 with your first job and never again. As you gain experience, you gain in pay. If someone tells you raising the minimum wage is good, just know they don't understand this. They are a sucker. So why is there a big push to raise the minimum wage? Remember, we are talking about the commies here. What is the difference between a free market and communism? One big difference is that instead of capitalism and the free market, the government owns the means of production and the goods and services. The people own nothing, nothing. The government gives you a job that you do for them. They take the goods and services from your labor and they give back to you what they think it is worth, not what you think it is worth. They can have a wage for everyone of $15 an hour, and they fix the cost of items because they own that as well. There is little ability to change your wage or work harder or longer to improve your level of living or individual wealth. In fact, they believe individual wealth is evil and you can get thrown in jail for this moral crime. However, if you are in charge of the government or at the top of the hierarchy, that does not apply. A living wage decreases productivity, which hurts the economy more. Why should you break your neck to make a better life for yourself and your family, like you get in a merit-based free market economy, when it doesn't matter how hard you work, you will get the same amount of money, and you will get the same amount of money as the guy who works half as hard as you do, or not at all? Where's the incentive for hard work? There is none. That's communism. If you live in a state that has voted in the $15 an hour minimum wage, get a petition going to put it on the ballot at the next election and educate the voters to overturn it. You will see an immediate positive impact to the expense of living in your area. If you live somewhere where it hasn't been voted in, vote to keep it out. Just say no. Understanding this inverse relationship to the economy, the impact to you and your ability to increase your individual wealth is very important. We'll talk about this some more in the next video called the free market competition effect. Think of these very real concepts when you start to think about what you want for Gen Z's America. What is important to you for your future? The system of a free market that leads to individual prosperity and the ability to keep what you work for has never been under greater jeopardy than it is right now. What policies do you want? Vote like your future depends on it, because it does.